The Great Lakes are one of the largest freshwater systems in the world, accounting for 21% of the world's surface freshwater and 84% of North America's. In the face of a changing climate, water is one of the most valuable resources in the world. As the importance of the Great Lakes becomes more apparent than ever, cities along their coasts are playing an ever-growing role as stewards of the watersheds they inhabit. In the last century, decades of industry and aging water infrastructure have brought Cleveland and its watershed to more than one environmental precipice. Today, the region is facing increasingly complex challenges that demand complex solutions. And leaders in Northeast Ohio are joining forces to find a way forward.
So it's an actual 3D model of the West Creek watershed with the goal of kind of bringing it to life for our visitors and helping them see it from an aerial view, like actually feel it. The tactile features are accurate to the watershed, so it actually allows you to imagine it as a 3D model.
The mission of this facility is to restore and protect our urban watersheds. And we do that in 3 ways. We do that by advancing the science of stormwater and watershed management, applying what we've learned, and then incorporating the community as we do that.
You know, it's funny when you talk about like watershed stewardship. I would tell you one of the first things that I would learn doing this work is people would always say, what is a watershed? You know, like just the basics of it, like, wait, what is this watershed again?
I like to talk about a watershed in a couple of ways. One is a watershed is the area of land that gathers water. So if we think of it like a tool shed that stores tools, a watershed stores water, but then if we think about like a snake shedding its skin, a watershed also sheds its water to a downstream watershed.
Yeah, when I think about our region in Cleveland and water infrastructure, it's one of those kind of hidden assets, you know. I remember trying to teach people about it and they wouldn't even know like where it is. You know, it's kind of like you're in a natural setting and all of a sudden you turn and look and you're like, oh, there's a pipe. You know, where is that coming from? So when you talk about what does it mean to be a watershed, you know, steward in your environment, that's a whole nother level.
In 1969, another fire in the Cuyahoga, a relative unknown, became an overnight sensation. The pollution problem received national attention.
Whether you call the city of Cleveland or the greater Cleveland area the kind of a comeback city, the Cuyahoga River did catch on fire 13 times. Did it spur or was a catalyst to greater environmental law change in the nation? Absolutely.
I have never been hesitant to take credit for Cleveland being really the entity, the city that created the Clean Water Act.
If we go back to the 1960s, the battle days, you know, we were dumping industrial pollutants down into pipes straight into the river. You know, other changes locally and nationally, we recognized that this was really not a great place to live, work, and play. We went after the easier things first. If we know that there's a pipe dumping into the river here and that pipe is connected to that factory there, we can work directly with that factory to reduce the amount of pollution, to regulate and reduce the pollution. And so the first changes that happened in the 1970s were really going after what we call point source discharges of pollution. And we've been really successful at reducing those, and the Cuyahoga River is so much cleaner because of it. We're left with now is what's called non-point source pollution, and that's all the things coming off of parking lots and lawns and driveways, and that is hundreds of thousands of different homeowners and lots of different sources of pollution all coming in at different amounts and different times, and there's no way to just write an easy law that says you can't do that. The types of tools that we need to reduce non-point source pollution are fundamentally different than when we were just going after a few polluters with pipes directly into the river.
As Cleveland continues to face ever-complex environmental challenges, organizations across Northeast Ohio are collaborating to combat non-point source pollution and model sustainable land and water use for the Great Lakes region and beyond.
So we're standing on the porous concrete surface right now, and you can see visibly it is very different than that concrete over there. So that's our impervious concrete. And you can see just by texture, there's definitely a difference here. This one looks a little bit more like Rice Krispies, although we don't recommend putting a bite into it because it'll break your teeth. But this is about 3 or so inches thick. And then below that, we've got some rocks and gravel and then just the soil. So the idea behind this is creating a surface that we can walk on, drive on, utilize just like a sidewalk, a driveway, maybe even eventually a road, but it provides filtration, whereas we can't get that through here, and infiltration as well. So I like to do a little splashing demonstration. So I'm gonna pour water on here, lots of water. And you can see, not a puddle to be seen. Sometimes you listen really close, you can hear it trickling down. So now we're actually hearing the sounds of the water slowly moving down through the soil, slowing down, right? Slow the flow. If there's any nutrients, let's say like maybe I washed some fertilizer in here by accident, now that excess nitrogen and phosphorus isn't just washing into a waterway and causing algal blooms. It's going back into the ground where it can be used by nature.
We like to think that our natural areas, like our forests, are green infrastructure, our wetlands, etc. But when we put it on a built landscape, thinking about residential neighborhoods, we try to capture stormwater at the source.
You can put it into a landscape where houses and buildings and roads already exist. It doesn't necessarily need to take up large amounts of the land space, and it can kind of be fit in the environment that already exists.
All right. Welcome to our green roof. So our green roof is 2,400 square feet. We can get really close to it. It is basically sedums and alliums, so succulents of multiple kinds up here. We also see things like asters growing and grasses as well. And ours is designed with a nifty feature of these 1 by 2 foot square boxes that you can lift out, a little more like trays. And that's designed so if we have a damaged area that we need to reseed, we can remove it easily and we don't have to just kind of scoop it out. So it's a really nice system for maintenance on this. I find that the more you demonstrate, the easier it is for people to grasp the concepts. You could say impervious a bunch of times, but that doesn't stick. What sticks is seeing the physical object they can put down.
And these demonstrations are being put down on the ground. Alongside collaborative research with universities like Kent State, they are informing work on a city-wide scale. Organizations like the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, Cleveland Metroparks, and West Creek Conservancy are implementing what they've learned on urban, residential, and industrial sites alike.
And so this green infrastructure installation was put into place in 2014. There's about 10,000 square feet of flat roof area that's externally drained, so you can see the downspouts here. Oh, yeah. So they requested funds to install 2 500-gallon cisterns that they capture the roof water from. And then they use those cisterns that captured water and they pump that back up to the top of the roof, and then that has an irrigation system that irrigates the building face that you see here.
Outside of the city proper, partners are implementing projects with a focus on a coexistence and even productive partnership with industry.
This site was really previously a lot of warehouse, a lot of hard surface, work yard. There were actually multiple bridges across the creek. There's even like an office that was right over West Creek. So on the other side here is Kurtz Brothers. They are a soil company, so they sell a lot of soil, they process, they create compost, and even the bioretention soil we use in our stormwater practices. But they have a big work yard and big roof as well. So their runoff actually goes into these treatment areas in the floodplain before it gets to the creek. So it's a nice stormwater treatment area as well.
Seems like a good cooperation with the manufacturing industry and then of course the site here.
Yeah, I mean, this area used to flood all the time, and even Kurtz Brothers would get flooding as well. Some businesses, they want to build a levee. They just want to almost like separate themselves from the rivers behind them, and it's not a natural solution. And this is showing that a natural solution can work.
So you've exactly hit on one of the problems that's been motivating me for the last decade, which is how much is enough? How much green infrastructure do we need? How much stormwater control do we need to see a real tangible difference in the flow and the water quality and the ecology of our streams and rivers in urban areas? And there isn't an easy answer to that, but what our research, multiple different aspects of our research is showing is that if you can treat about 20% of the total impervious surface in the watershed, you can start to see really tangible differences in the flow in the stream. We are at about 11% in the Cleveland area of impervious surfaces treated based on some numbers that we've been able to collect and look at and some really rough estimates. So we have a ways to go. But that means that the improvements we're already seeing in Cleveland streams are only going to get better. These are really great signs that we're moving in the right direction, and we need to just keep going and adding more to the landscape.
But just as important to Cleveland's progress is a shared vision and a willingness to work together across geographic, political, and social boundaries. Back in 1969, Cleveland's Carl Stokes, who served as the first black mayor of a major U.S. city, not only championed the water's cleanup, but also recognized that the most environmentally degraded areas were also the most poverty-stricken.
When you're like one of the top communities for people who don't have resources, meaning you don't even have a decent job that can pay for your utilities, that becomes like a real important issue of how do we help, make sure that everyone has access to water despite how much money they're making, on a day-to-day basis or annually. That's a problem in our region, and that's something that needs to be addressed like yesterday.
All of life is really about relationships, in my opinion. And the ability to forge good partnership relationships, to do things in a way that gets the outcome you want to get, but to do it in an efficient and fair manner, understanding that another one of the drivers for our region is we're, like it or not, we're one of the poorest large cities in the country. You do everything you can to figure out not only how to get the outcome you want, but how to do it in the most efficient and cost-effective manner.
Water knows no boundaries. They don't understand political boundaries. So we do have to work together to collaboratively address. We take a watershed approach to stewardship across the region, so it takes many partners to establish and deliver that water quality to the region.
You see such a cross-pollination of great public-private partnerships within the city of Cleveland and greater Cuyahoga County, Northeast Ohio, that have really come together with respect to watershed restoration and preservation, but also equitable transportation, recreation, and coastal resiliency.
I think we do great work here with partnerships in Northeast Ohio in conserving green space. I mean, I think the West Creek Reservation is a phenomenal example of it. This used to be a landfill. There's a landfill surrounded by trees, and bit by bit by bit, this reservation was built, and literally we add on to We add on to this reservation, we add on to most of our reservations every single year to the tune of somewhere typically between 300 and 1,000 acres a year of green space that we continue to try to conserve and connect.
I think a lot of Clevelanders have that chip on their shoulder and carry that baggage of being the place where the river burned and having that kind of rust-colored image. But there is so much innovation here. There's so much creativity. There are amazing professionals in so many different sectors here in the Cleveland area, just really making a difference.
I've seen a lot of change over 20 years. You know, it's interesting, again, having grown up 2.5 hours south of here, and in the 80s and 90s, it was the mistake on the lake and the river that burns and all of that. And you know, 20 years ago, people looked at us kind of weird when they're like, you're moving to Cleveland, really?
Well, we really are trying to flip the script and refer to Cleveland as the green city on the Blue Lake.
I think Cleveland will become like a place where people want to covet and be. But I kind of envision like people scrambling to get to Cleveland. You know, like we're going to become like the Mecca where people want to be.
In the backdrop of climate change, Cleveland will be one of the places to be. So it behooves us now to continue our hard work in protecting the water resources in Northeast Ohio, and we've done a really good job in the last 50 years.
So water is the best example there is of, a global issue. It impacts us all, completely finite resource, and what we do here has far-reaching impacts across the region, across the nation, and across the world.